At $4,300, the Suzuki DR200 SE is the most affordable motorcycle in this competition. I mean, it kind of looks that way. I mean, it just the aesthetics of it, the controls, it feels really, really old. It feels like the motorcycle that I rode when I was 16 years old back in like the 90s. Surprisingly, the engine, it actually compares pretty good with these bikes. The bottom end is not quite as strong as the Hondas, but actually the top end is. Like in a drag race between the Honda will get the jump, but as soon as the Suzuki reaches high RPM, it blows right past the Honda, which is surprising because it actually got 30 cc's less of engine displacement. Ergonomics wise, the Suzuki's kind of goofy, like the handlebars are real swept back, real far back. They don't kind of feel weird. The guy with long legs like me, you kind of you don't really hit your knees on the handlebar, but it could definitely happen on the trail. The motorcycle also is dimensionally the smallest. It's the best for a small rider, for a female. They will absolutely love the Suzuki because it feels like the smallest bike. Brakes on the Suzuki are pretty good, not up to the rest of the specs, and it's got a rear drum brake, so I mean, it's a little bit harder to modulate on-off than the disc brake. The coolest thing about the Suzuki is the jetting. Like the jetting, they haven't messed with it at all. It's totally stock, but in the morning, turn on the key, flip the start switch. You don't even need to choke. Just push the starter button. The engine rumbles right to life. It sets into a nice idle. It doesn't bog. I mean, it doesn't need to be warmed up. It just runs right away. So really surprised about how well it carburetes and runs even at this altitude. Overall, if you're looking for just the least expensive motorcycle, then you have to pick the Suzuki because it only costs $4,200. 2010 Honda CRF 230L. Now, at first you're probably thinking, why are you comparing this little mini bike with an air-cooled engine to these liquid-cooled dirt bikes? And we thought the same thing, but then when you start riding the CRF 230L, you quickly figure out that this bike actually compares quite nicely to both liquid-cooled engines. It doesn't have quite as much power as the liquid-cooled bikes, but off the line, the bottom end on that bike is actually more powerful than even the WR. Like, it gets off the line really, really well. Mid-range is kind of okay, but as soon as you get to the top, the engine just does not want to rev out. It can't hold this momentum at higher RPM. So this is the one bike you have to short shift. Whenever you start rolling, just grab another gear and ride that small torque wave off the bottom, because that's where the bike really likes to be ridden. Ergonomically, this bike is definitely oriented for a smaller rider, someone even smaller than the Kawasaki rider, like 5'8" and under. It's just a little bit small the way the body works set up and the handlebar and the seat. It's really low to the ground. So if you're a woman or a novice motorcyclist, this bike will definitely be for you. Brakes on the motorcycle, the front brake actually works really, really well. It's actually very, very powerful. It's easy to use. The rear brake was kind of funny. It has a disc rear brake, but it actually kind of felt like a drum. It was really grabby and it was really hard to modulate. Jetting wise, we didn't change the jetting at all. It's got a carburetor. It probably is the bike that runs the poorest out of the box here. It definitely needs some choke in the morning. It needs a little bit of warm-up time for the engine to get warm before it carburetes real smooth. And even when the engine's warm, it carburetes well. The bike doesn't hesitate, doesn't jerk or anything, but you can tell it's just not totally 100% properly jetted like the Yamaha, the Kawasaki, or even the Suzuki. All right, 2010 Kawasaki KLX 250S. This motorcycle, without a doubt, is the best value for your money. It only costs $5,000. It's priced identically to the CRF 230L. And then for that, you get a liquid-cooled engine. Doesn't have quite as much power as the Yamaha. Bottom end's kind of soft. Mid-range is actually really, really good. So to really maximize the performance of this engine, you gotta have it in like the between 7,000 and 9,000 RPM window. Unlike the Yamaha, the KLX 250S is carbureted. Surprisingly, it runs pretty good up here at 8,000 feet. We didn't change the jetting at all. It's completely stock. In the morning or whenever the engine gets cold, it needs some choke and it needs a couple minutes to warm up before it runs real good. But after that, it carburetes real smoothly, doesn't hesitate, doesn't hiccup, runs real nice. On the road, the motorcycle feels a little bit smaller ergonomically than the WR250R. Girls and maybe people that are like 5'8" will have a much better time on that bike than the Yamaha. Yamaha is a little more oriented for taller folks. But overall, it's a really nice motorcycle. Suspension's a little bit more bargain basement as compared to the WR. The fork has rebound, but doesn't have any compression dampening, and the shock has rebound, compression, and preload. But the suspension, the spring rate seemed a little bit soft, and it was pretty easy to overwhelm the suspension on the KLX. Brakes also not quite as strong as the Yamaha or even the Honda's front brake, in fact, which is kind of surprising. Overall though, I mean, like if you're looking for an affordable liquid-cooled dual sport that you can ride every day, ride to work, ride the trails, ride a single track, ride wherever you want, it's hard to beat the Kawasaki. It goes almost 100 miles per hour down the hill. It cruises down the freeway at about 75, 80. And we recorded pretty astronomical gas mileage figures. On our long ride, it actually got 66 miles to a gallon. And that was with like substantial amount of wide open throttle. So very, very impressive. The Yamaha WR250R. This bike is the most premium bike in the class. Everything is on a level above all the other motorcycles. One of the coolest things about the bike to me is it literally feels like a YZ motocross bike. Like the ergonomics, the way the cockpit is, the way the seat is shaped, and the bodywork and the handlebars, and foot pegs, everything. So when you're like riding around the trails and stuff like that, man, it's so comfortable to get the thing like sliding and braking and accelerating. Like you have a lot of control with the bike, and your body inputs, like they do a lot of stuff to the motorcycle. It's really fun to ride off-road. It's the only motorcycle with a fuel-injected engine. You press the starter button and the bike fires immediately. It always runs perfectly. It doesn't hesitate, it doesn't sputter, it doesn't cough. It always just runs really cleanly. The engine also is in a little bit higher class than the other motorcycles, especially at the top end. Where the other motorcycles are kind of falling down, kind of stopping making power, the WR, man, it loves to rev. Like just when you think you can't rev it anymore, you gotta keep revving it because that's where it makes all the power. Also, the suspension on the motorcycle is it's at a level a little bit higher than the other bikes. It offers compression and rebound adjustment on both the fork and the shock. It also has those cool little air bleeder screws on the top of the fork, just like motocross bikes, so you can let the air out of the fork if you're really hitting gnarly terrain. It does a really good job on the road, even though it feels like a dirt bike. We went on like a 100-mile ride yesterday, and my body didn't get sore. You know, the seat's pretty wide. It's relatively comfortable for a small dual sport bike, and you could actually ride this thing to and from every day on the street.